Sonic Superstars is a pretty divisive game among Sonic fans. Some say that it's really good, and some say that it's their favorite classic Sonic game. It's like, okay, buddy. The majority of people think the game is pretty good, but heavily flawed at the same time. But then there's a still very large group of people that say that Sonic Superstars is a disappointment, which is something I've never understood. Even after making community posts about the topic and trying to get people's opinion, I've never really understood this take. Some of the opinions do have some weight to them, but I've never understood the being disappointed by the game part. I've always thought this take never really made sense, and today I want to explain why I think so. This video isn't necessarily to say that Superstars is the best game ever made. I personally like it more than most people do. It's personally my second favorite classic Sonic game, which is higher than most people would rank it, so I get that I am just a big fan of Superstars. But even removing that, I still think it's a bit ridiculous to call it a disappointment. I think that's a complete exaggeration. So without any further ado, let's get into it. I believe there are two main reasons that Sonic Superstars is so oftentimes called a disappointment. The first of which is that I believe the game is constantly trying to be forced into a mold that it doesn't fit in. What I mean by that is that I think fans oftentimes try to force Superstars into being Sonic Mania but original, which is not what Superstars really is. It does a good bit of things plenty different than Mania, and has very different strengths and weaknesses compared to Mania. They're very different games outside of just being classic Sonic. And so I think a lot of the Twitter discussion about this game during the pre-release really enforced this notion because, the classic physics being perfectly recreated in 3D, and then people being, T-Lopes is working on the music or whatever. I feel like there was just this want for the Mania team to return and make a fully original game that when we got just a classic Sonic game, I believe people really just tried to force it into a mold that it never really was. Sure, the idea of making another classic Sonic game did come from concepts of a Mania sequel, but that's not what Superstars is or ever was. And the other side of the coin is that I think issues in the game are often just blown out of proportion, because the two biggest criticisms that I do think are fair criticisms, alright, I'm not saying they are not fair criticism, is the bosses and the soundtrack. These two elements in the game are not especially great. I do appreciate a more robust boss design structure though. I think that was a very smart decision. I'm sorry, being able to beat up a boss in 3 seconds if you quote know what you're doing isn't exactly good design. I think having a more dedicated boss fight is a good idea. It's not a good idea when that boss fight takes up over half the stage time. That's not good. So I think people fairly criticize the bosses, especially in the later half of the game. In the first half, they're relatively fine, but as you keep going, they just keep getting lengthier and just more and more annoying. So I understand the frustration with the boss fights. And the soundtrack is also a fair thing to criticize. It's not especially great either. Outside of the T-Lopes stuff, there's like 3 songs that I think are actually even worth listening to at all. But personally for me, music being just middle of the road isn't gonna take me out of the experience. I think the music is plenty serviceable, it's fine. It's just not especially remarkable. And I think that's alright. It's inoffensive is how I see it. Sure, it's not very good, and I wish it was way better, but I don't think there's anything that's necessarily gonna be like, what on earth am I listening to? The closest you get to that is Press Factory. Don't get me wrong, that synth is pretty bad, but it could be much worse. And so yes, I think those are fair criticisms of the game, but I don't see how that ruins the game or makes it a disappointment. Sure, the bosses are pretty egregious at times, but overall, really just replaying the game, they really didn't give me that much trouble, especially if you actually collect the emeralds, which are not hard to do in this game. Trust me, I am terrible at finding any hidden rings in like any Sonic game. Like, I can never do that without a guide. Like, I am terrible at that, and I was able to get all the emeralds easily, like that was not hard at all. And so I don't really see how some of these later bosses, like some of these become kind of pitiful when you actually use the emerald powers. Not trying to say some sort of skill issue thing or whatever, the emerald powers are understandably not used because they don't really incentivize you to use them very often, so I can understand kind of forgetting about them. But still, these bosses are not that big of a hindrance. They really just take time. That's their biggest issue, is that they're just time consuming. I don't really think any of them were egregious in their design or were too frustrating outside of like the final boss and the final boss in Trip's story. That sucked. That was terrible. There's no defending that. So while Superstars is certainly not free of issues, I think these issues just are far outweighed by the fact that it really is just fun classic Sonic gameplay with nice visuals and interesting level design. While some of the gimmicks are a little bit stupid, I think overall they're generally pretty fun, and I think most of the things the game goes for are relatively fun. One of the biggest things I really like about this game the more I play it is the emerald powers. I thought these were kind of dumb when I first played the game, but the more I play it, the more I really appreciate this feature, because in the other classic Sonic games, I feel like we forget how hard it is to actually get the emeralds. I feel like we kind of forget that fact because we're either used to getting them due to a certain method, or we look up guides on how to find the big rings in 3 and Knuckles. But going in completely blind with no knowledge, it's very hard to realistically do that on a first playthrough. You're not getting all the emeralds on a first playthrough with no knowledge of how it works. And I think Superstars made a change for the positive to make it pretty reasonable to get all of the emeralds on your first run of the game. And the game does give you a pretty nice incentive for getting all of these, which is where the emerald powers come in. In the other classic games, you're not really given much of a reward for getting each individual emerald. It's really about getting all 7 together, and then you're given, whoa, a new super form, and it's like, wow, that's crazy or whatever. In the other games, the reward comes after getting all of them, but in Superstars, you get a reward for getting all of them and for each one you get, which I think is really smart. Sure, these emerald powers could have been used way better, and I think like a lot of these are really useless, honestly. Like, let's be honest here, some of these you're never gonna realistically use, but it's still really cool, and it gave me some solid motivation to keep getting all of the emeralds. Plus, Supersonic is just really good in this game anyways. So overall, Sonic Superstars is really just a fun experience that I think, while sure, it has issues, I feel like the disappointing tag doesn't make any sense. I think from the first trailer alone, if you just watch the announcement trailer, you have a pretty good grasp of what the game's going for. Like, honestly, you wouldn't need much more than this, and I think that you got a pretty reasonable grasp on the game. It's probably just a pretty good classic Sonic game. Not especially amazing, but it's just pretty good. It's pretty solid. And that's what I believe most people think, which is why I think the whole it being disappointing thing is very weird, because my perception of the game didn't change that much from the first trailer to release. The more I heard, the more confident I was in thinking, hey, this game's just gonna be pretty good. It looks really nice, and yeah, I'm pretty excited for it. So truly, I don't think it was the game itself or the game's marketing that made people hold this opinion. I think it's just truly blowing out of proportion issues that are genuine issues within the game, but just taking them way too far, and then trying to force the game to be a sort of Mania 2 when it never really was that. And so yeah, that's really about all I wanted to talk about today. I think Sonic Superstars is a fun game, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you agree with me or you think I'm a complete lunatic, whatever, I'd like to hear it. So with that said, I hope all of you have an amazing rest of your day. God bless.